Mark Hanson is the British Heart Foundation Professor and Director of the Institute of Developmental Sciences. Mark, what's your purpose in life?
I suppose it's to understand how the processes of normal fetal development in various parts of the world have long-term consequences, particularly for non-communicable diseases, NCDs as they're called. This is cardiovascular disease, diabetes, chronic lung disease and some forms of cancer. Huge problems in many countries, killing actually more than 60% of the population of the world, and sadly 80% of those deaths are occurring in low and middle income countries. So I want to understand what's going on and how development is leading to that risk, with a view ultimately to finding new ways of reducing it.
And what motivated you to this area of research?
I suppose when I trained as a physiologist and decided that clinical medicine was not for me and that teaching and research was more of my interest, I looked around and lit on the area of development as something which I thought was perhaps rather oversimplified. Somebody once said that for every complex problem there is a simple answer, and it's always wrong. And so I began to think about what was known about development in those days, and it was very much the idea that a genetic program led to the assembly of the human body, rather in the way that you might assemble a car on a production line. This was purely driven by genes, and that if disease resulted in later life, the kind of chronic diseases I mentioned a moment ago, those were probably due to adult lifestyle. But as the 20th century played out, we realised from the Human Genome Project that actually we weren't finding fixed genetic causes for many of these common diseases, and that many adult lifestyle interventions to make people lose weight and take more exercise and have a better diet and so on, whilst they were effective to a degree, were not really reducing the risk of disease adequately. And even worse, that these diseases were increasing out of all magnitude in developing countries, which by the standards of Westerners were still very poor. They weren't affluent societies. And so I became very interested in the idea of how we might research this in more detail, and it led to the founding, of which I was a partner, of the Society for Developmental Origins of Health and Disease, or DOHAD, which we established in 2003.
So how are you pursuing it? What sort of research are you doing?
It's very much about team building. It's very much about interdisciplinary research. So the research that's going on here in Southampton and with collaborators around the world and in many other universities around the world too, brings together epidemiologists, those interested in population science. It brings basic scientists, especially those interested in genetics and increasingly epigenetics, and then a range of clinicians who are involved in translational medicine, in cardiovascular medicine, in respiratory medicine, in diabetes, in renal medicine, as well, of course, as obstetrics and gynecology. And then more and more we're linking to economic historians, the people who are able to help us look back into the past to see where we've come from and why we're where we are and how much it will cost in the future if we don't do something about it. We're linking with social scientists who can help us understand how social processes interact with our development. And we're linking with government officials in public health and global health to see how the new ideas can be applied to improve public health.
And how do you measure your progress?
I suppose in the DOHAD field, by a combination of things really. One is that this rather niche area, as it was when it started, is now receiving very substantial funding from governments, from charities, from organisations such as National Institutes of Health in the United States. There have been hundreds, actually thousands of papers in the DOHAD field. We have a burgeoning international society with, I think, about more than 600 members now in 47 countries, which has an annual a congress, a World Congress every 2 years. And the area and the concept is now very much on the agenda of organisations like the World Health Organization, as well as national governments, looking to see how we can reduce the impact and the incidence of non-communicable diseases around the world.
Thank you very much.